Okay, I just wanted to let everyone know we started recording and we're going to get started in just a minute. Um, welcome again to the Hub, and we'll be right with you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the WSU Food Systems Hub. My name is Laura Lewis, and I'm director of the WSU Food Systems program. And I'm typically joined by Ava Kaiser, Nicole Witham, and Tia Taylor, but there's a bunch of power outages out on the Olympic Peninsula right now. So luckily I have power for the time being. So just bear with us today. Hopefully we won't have any technical difficulties. We're really excited today to have the WSDA Regional Markets Program here to talk about the Rapid Response Grant Program available for livestock producers. So we're going to be joined by them in just a few minutes. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the WSU Food Systems Hub, and then we're going to go right into talking about the Meat Processor Pandemic Relief Grant. And then we're also going to hear from the WSU Extension WA Meetup Technical Assistance Team, particularly Paul Kuber and Sarah Smith. So we're really excited to have you all here today. Please introduce yourself in the Zoom chat box. Let us know who you are, where you are located, and what you do. And also please use this chat box to ask questions, share links and resources for the group. We'll be able to ask your questions during our presentations today. So make sure that you reach out with those questions. We'll share that chat box, or we'll keep that chat box dialogue as well, and potentially use it for some of the frequently asked questions resources that we're coming up with to address any support for the grant. So a little bit about the WSU Food Systems program. We are a statewide program. We seek to work with communities throughout the state to foster viable farm businesses, optimize sustainable natural resource stewardship, and to promote scaled processing and distribution, always in the pursuit of access to healthy food for all. We have a statewide reach with our team, which is comprised of over 80 individuals, both internal to WSU, faculty and staff that work across the food system, as well as several external partners across the state, including the WSDA Regional Market System. Really excited, our program, excited to have them participate in the hub again today. And so the hub itself was created to address concerns around COVID back in March, and we've kept it going with a broader view beyond just resources surrounding COVID. So we provide this as a space to connect regularly with our team members and external partners working to support the Washington food system, to collect and update COVID-19 resources, to again support the Washington food system, and to provide time and space to share stories and receive support from one another. Just a reminder to go and check out the calendar of events. We update this regularly with information on events, webinars, and resources that are available. And I am going to turn it over now to Laura Raymond. So welcome, Laura, and thank you for participating in the hub today.
Great, thank you. It took me a moment to unmute, but I am here and ready to go on Monday morning. I'm so sorry to hear that you all are out of power. It's been blustery on the west side. Well, I like to always kind of get a sense of who's here. And I appreciate that everyone's kind of typing in the chat just to give a sense of who's listening in so we can make sure to kind of address the right types of questions. So I'm just scanning the chat here to get a quick sense of that. I'm guessing that a lot of people are here particularly with some interest in the meat processor grant. So that's wonderful. And it looks like you are sharing the website on your screen, from your screen. Is that right, Laura? So I don't need
Yes,
to
I
do
can
that.
do that. I can pull up the website. Yep, I can do that.
I can do it as well, however you would
Yeah,
like.
maybe it's easier if you do. I'll stop sharing right now.
Okay, great. Thanks everyone while we do the logistics here. Okay, how's that look?
Looks great.
Okay, great. Well, so I'd like to give a little, what I'd like to do is give a little bit of background on this grant opportunity in general. And then I would like to actually walk through some of the specifics of the guidelines and the application. And then we can have some opportunity for questions. If it works for people, although you'll have to hear my voice for a bit, I'd like to just sort of walk through most of that before we do questions. The grant's been open about a little over a week, I guess, if that's right, or about a week. And I find that I'm getting a lot of really great questions, and a lot of them are questions that are addressed in the guidelines. So I think if we go through that first, we might cover a lot of the questions that people are coming in with. And then we can go into clarifying specifics from there. Does that sound good to people? Kind of watching for nods. We're right here on the web page on WSDA's website dedicated to this grant opportunity. And this grant opportunity came about because we have been hearing from both processors and predominantly we've been hearing from producers since actually the spring about concerns and challenges in being able to get timely slaughter and processing for their animals. And this is an issue that we know is somewhat ongoing, but has really been increased due to the pressures on our national and local food system and particularly meat supply chain because of the coronavirus pandemic. So just as a little bit of context, I think most people on this call are familiar, but just to ground us all, due to health concerns and just all of the wacky supply chain stuff that was going on with closures of restaurants and food service, we had a major disruption in the meat processing world. In particular, a lot of the illnesses and COVID cases in national meat processing plants closed plants for some time. That caused a significant backlog in moving livestock through the system. There was massive depopulation of animals, particularly in the Midwest, where a lot of the large plants are concentrated, but that had ripple effects throughout the nation, including what we've seen in Washington State is a lot, well, there's a whole combination of things. One is that there was a sort of a temporary lack of supply in grocery stores. And so consumers who are already, a little concerned about food supply issues and food security, that got people's attention. And that drove interest and demand for meat from local producers. So we saw a lot of consumers reaching out to farms and producers in their region and saying, I want to get meat from you, which of course led to an increase in production for those producers that had the ability to scale up in that way. We also have seen an addition, a large increase in swine in Washington state being raised, and some of that has been due to greater availability of low-cost swine from the Midwest, as there were no people knew there like wouldn't be processing options for those animals, and so we're dealing with just frankly just a greater number of livestock. And that all of that has put pressure on our processors of all scales in Washington state. And then, of course, combined with the need to change operations for worker safety, which has sometimes meant, changing the number of employees on the job at any given time, reconfiguring plants to the extent that it's possible to allow for better social distancing and better ventilation, and also just an increase in operating costs around worker safety, PPE, et cetera. So we've been hearing from both processors and producers, that they're booked out for a long time. There's a lot more, as far as we can tell, there's more households who are choosing to raise their own livestock, in some cases maybe for the first time, who have not perhaps yet scheduled processing, although now we're well into the season, so hopefully people are working on that. But so anyway, this is just the condition, and we know that a lot of processors are really pressured by this, not just by the increased demand, but by this sort of brought to light, how people are making do and making things work. And with this extra pressure, sometimes facilities, workforce, et cetera, just have not been adequate to respond. So that's the context in which WSDA requested federal CARES Act relief funds that were allocated to Washington state to be directed to this need. And we got word on October 16th that we would have some of those CARES funds to make available for this purpose. And so that's the purpose of this grant. Let me try to scroll. Oops. Perhaps one of you who is really Zoom savvy, do you have any tips for being able to see your scroll bar while you're also sharing your screen? It's hidden by that green box. I think I'm making it work.
Yeah, if you go to the view options, you should be able to hide floating panel. At the top right, there should be a drop down of that green screen that's blocking it, and you can push hide floating panel or something like that.
There we go. Hide video panel, hide floating meeting controls.
Yeah, that's it. The floating meeting controls, try that one.
Nope, that's okay. I think I can get it to work here. There's just a sliver of the bar in my view. So that's the purpose, that's the background, that's the context. What we're wanting the intention of this grant is to support primarily small and mid-scale processors and slaughterers in Washington state to be able to either recoup costs that they've already expensed in order to expand their operating capacity to serve this demand surge, or for expenses that they may be able to make within the eligible time frame, similarly to respond to the demand surge. So that's really the overall intent. I'm going to go into a little bit of specifics on the grant now. Everyone tracking? So the grant is open now. It opened on it opened on October 23rd, and it remains open until November 16th. Applications will be reviewed once all the applications have been received. So this is not a first come, first serve. We're accepting all applications until the deadline, and then they'll be reviewed, and we will be getting back to applicants by November 15th with award notifications. These are the key highlight dates here. I'm just going down the timeline. This grant covers expenditures from March 21st until December 30th. We'll go into this more, but that December 30th is the last date of any expenditures can be incurred. And for folks who are awarded grants, you will need to have all of your expense documentation into WSDA by January 31st at the latest for payment. So how to apply? I'm scrolling down. This is all on the website here on this single page. The first and most important thing to do is to read the grant guidelines. There's important information in there. And when you submit the application, you're acknowledging that you've read the grant guidelines. There's also a link to the application form, and then a form for getting signed up within the state system so that if awarded, the state can make payments to you. So I'm just going to go ahead to the, if you click through this, it'll take you to the grant guidelines, which I have here. So we've talked a little bit about the purpose, the overall purpose and intent. There are about a total of about $4.6 million allocated for grants. The total allocation from the state CARES funds was $5 million. Some of that difference is covering grant administration costs and also some technical assistance and expanded capacity at WSU, which you'll be hearing more about in the future. So here's getting into the nitty gritty. I'm just gonna, and I apologize, this may be a little dull for those of you who have already read the guidelines, but I just think we're recording this, it'll be available. And so we wanna make sure that we walk through these particulars and then take questions. So very quickly, currently applicants can submit applications for up to $150,000 in eligible expenses that must have been or will be incurred between March 1st and December 30th of this year. WSU will be reviewing all of the applications. I mentioned we'll be doing that all at once after all the applications are received and the application period is closed. Expenses that are submitted should respond to those challenges that I outlined. They should contribute to the purpose of the grant, in particular by increasing or improving livestock slaughter and meat processing capacity. Upon reviewing the awards, WSDA does reserve the right to adjust the awards. So we'll be looking at how many applications are received and what the total request need is across all those applications, how much money is available. We'll be reviewing what of the submitted expenses are actually eligible. We'll be reviewing the applications to make sure the applicant is eligible. And then based on all of those factors may increase or decrease the award if awarded, depending on kind of a combination of those factors. Applicants that are awarded funds will be required to sign a contract with WSDA and will be required to submit expense documentation. So at the bottom of this guidelines, there's a list of sample expenditures that could be eligible. Backup doesn't need to be super complicated, but it does need to show that that expense was made and give some idea of what that money was spent on. So like a receipt is an example. Like if you purchase some equipment, a receipt that you paid for that equipment, a delivery receipt is an example of backup documentation. I mentioned before that we're asking people to submit that statewide vendor and payee form with the application. Just the way the state system works, in order to issue a check or a payment to anybody, we need to have that entity registered in the state system, and that can take some time. So we're asking people to submit that form with their application so that we can review it and make sure there's not any just kind of funny responses in there, because we've found that if there's anything that's just not quite right on those forms, they can get tripped up in the system. It can take a lot longer. And because this grant timeline is so tight, we want to just help kind of head off any potential issues there, and get that going quickly. So even though we're asking you for that, we're going to put it through into the system prior to making the awards, simply to get that flowing. So I just want to be clear that the fact that that piece of the process is initiated does not indicate that you've been given an award. You'll get a formal award notification after we review all the applicants. Sorry, I skipped the screen there. This is a reimbursement grant. So we are expecting to make reimbursement payments for expenses that have been made and documented. We recognize that that is a barrier for some producers, and we are looking into if there's any options for very specific challenging instances where that might pose a really undue barrier. But and so you'll see on the application, there is an option to check a box to indicate if the fact that this grant is a reimbursement, strictly reimbursement basis, would mean that needed expenditures can't be made. But I will say right now, we're just wanting to understand where that need exists. We do not yet know if we'll be able to make any exceptions to the reimbursement basis. Because this grant is on such a short time frame, we're kind of crunching a lot of information and sort of opportunity into the application, because we don't have the opportunity to do second rounds. We don't have the opportunity to do a whole bunch of follow-up. So that's the reason for that. So who is eligible to apply? You need to be a slaughter or a meat processing establishment owned and operated in Washington State with 250 employees or fewer. You have to be registered to do business in Washington, so you need to have a UBI, business, identification number. And you must be currently licensed or inspected or permitted as appropriate to do USDA slaughter or processing, WSDA custom exempt slaughter or processing, or be a retail meat establishment licensed to do processing, and be a direct marketing producer. So I've gotten some questions on this one. The intent of this is there is an opportunity for some direct marketing producers to process their own animals under local health jurisdiction inspection after they have had that livestock slaughtered under USDA inspection, and if those products are going to be sold directly to their end consumers, for example, at a farmer's market. So this is a really, really, really specific condition, or and I don't actually know that there are very many, if any, processes in our state who fit this exemption, but in case there are, we didn't want to exclude them. So I've gotten questions from people who have their meat or their animals slaughtered and processed by a different USDA inspected slaughterer, get those retail cuts back, and then sell those retail cuts. That's not what this item refers to. This is when the producer themselves is doing further processing of their own USDA inspected slaughtered meat. We can talk more about that one later, but I've gotten questions about that, so I wanted to be real clear about that. Poultry processors are eligible to apply for this grant. However, priority is being given to livestock processors. So poultry producer processors, be aware of that. We really are trying to avoid backlog challenges in the livestock supply chain. And finally, the business needs to have experienced impacts related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a COVID-19 pandemic relief grant. And so the expenses that you're requesting the grant to cover need to be related to pressures that the business has experienced because of pandemic conditions. Eligible expenses, again, the most important thing is they need to have been expensed between March 1 and December 30 of this year. And they need to be actually related to increasing operational capacity to slaughter or process livestock, and or improve COVID worker safety. Customer safety too, but those are the primary. I'm so sorry, I keep bumping around on this scroll. Another question that we've been getting is, okay, I've gotten some other support through other programs. You know, maybe I applied for a PPP, or maybe I got the CFAP, the USDA CFAP direct payments. Does that make me ineligible for this grant? The short answer is no, you're not ineligible. But if you are going to get this expenses reimbursed through another form, whether that's federal, state, local relief funds, or even your own insurance, those expenses are not eligible. So you cannot double dip. I think it's probably easiest to, I think I've actually touched on all of the items here in the application and grant process, sort of a review of what we opened the call with. I guess the final piece is that in addition to, if awarded, in addition to submitting receipt expense documentation to WSDA by January 31 in order to receive a payment, awardees also need to keep that documentation for at least 5 years, and that's for audit purposes. If WSDA is audited, we may need to be requesting those records from grantees. I think that's it. So there is a list of the types of expenses that might be eligible. I want to be clear that these are not blanket eligibility. These are examples of the types of things that could be eligible. It depends a little bit on how they fit into, you know, the individual operation's ability to respond to the demand surge, you know, when they were expensed. And I guess those are the primary ones, but this is the type, this sort of gives you an idea of the breadth of expenditures that could be eligible. Capital improvements, equipment, wages for overtime, new employees, waste management, coolers, livestock intake, slaughter improvements, you know, just there's a sampling of those there. Okay, that's the big overview. Should we take questions?
Yeah, let's go ahead and take questions. I didn't know if you wanted to just even open the grant application itself.
Oh yeah, sure, thanks. That's
yeah.
Yeah, happy to do that. I forgot about that. So just to For people who are nervous, have maybe not applied for a grant before and are feeling unsure about this process, the application is really pretty straightforward. So to just sort of reassure people, let's look at it really quickly. This is what it looks like. It's a PDF. You can download it and print it out and write in by hand if you like. You can also type into the, you can open it on your computer and type into the fields and then save it. We ask for basic information about the business, contact information, tax identification number, UBI. We want to know a little bit about the facility. This is just kind of to give us a sense of the current operating scale and services. So number of employees, and then the type of license or inspection that you're operating under. How many livestock are slaughtered and or processed weekly. How many species you deal with, if you're able to work with non-standard breeds, and the number of livestock producers that your operation serves. There's a section to list out the expenses that you're requesting funding for. Estimates are okay. We know in some cases if it's a purchase yet to be made, you don't know the exact expense. And so, you know, your best, it's good to do a little work before you fill it out to find out what it will cost. But, you know, if it's off by a small amount from what you would actually end up submitting a receipt for, that's okay. We want to know if that, just to get a sense of sort of the readiness to actually make the expenditure, or the readiness for this plan to be put in place. We want to get a sense of how many of these expenditures you've already made versus ones that you would need to be making before the grant activity period closes. So these are the categories. Total. There, as I mentioned, we're accepting applications for up to $150,000. In the rare case that we get fewer requests than the total amount of money available, we are interested to know if people have needs above $150,000. And so there's an opportunity to request, identify how much more you could use if in some instance that is it's possible to award more funds. I don't think that will be likely, but we're asking that question just in case, as I mentioned, because the time frame is so condensed. And then there's a short piece of the application where you can just basically explain how your business has been impacted by COVID and how these expenditures are going to help you respond to that impact. Doesn't have to be long and detailed. We just want to understand a little bit about how these expenditures are contributing to the purpose of the project overall. And then there's just a whole bunch of check boxes that let us know what some of those impacts of receiving this funding will be on your operation. Production capacity, labor capacity, service capacity. And then finally, there's a signature required, and you need to attest that, you know, the information is true and correct. You recognize that this application is not an agreement to fund. It's not an award. It's just an application at this point. You're recognizing that the awards may be lower, more than or less than what you actually apply for. That you're not double dipping, that your business is in good standing, and that WSDA is going to make their awards based on the information provided. Okay, I know that was a lot. Thanks. It was probably not the most exciting presentation you've ever heard, but I do want to make sure that that information is out there. And I know how it can be to go to a website and think, oh my gosh, I got to read this whole document. So we just wanted to walk you through it. And for those of you who are resource providers yourselves, who may be getting questions from folks in your region, we want to make sure that you've had this overview as well.
Great, thank you so much, Laura. Let's go
Should
ahead
I
and
stop
open it up.
sharing, Laura?
Sure.
Or do
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, go ahead. And we can open it up for questions. I know there was a couple in the chat box. We had one question about can a local producer that lived in Washington state and moved out still be eligible?
Well, the business needs to be owned and operated in Washington state.
Okay. And then another just inquiry about why priority was given to livestock producers over poultry producers.
Because that's really where we're seeing the pandemic concern and demand in terms of major concerns if where there is a major bottleneck, I should say, in livestock that are having may not be able to be harvested and processed in time. Just responding to the major public safety emergency of COVID, which is what the coronavirus relief funds that are being used are intended for.
Other questions for Laura? You can unmute
We
yourself.
put everybody to sleep.
That's right. You can unmute yourself or here we go. I have a couple of questions. I have a major electrical expense coming up through PSE. They are backed up and it won't likely get going until spring. Should I include this or leave it out?
Yeah, these are tricky questions. In general, I would say that if you have expenses that you've already expensed or you are confident will be able to be expensed by the end of December, that's going to be a lot easier for everybody. And I think one of the things that I think is just human nature is we see the opportunity to get cash in and we think about what could we buy with this? And that is a real need, and that is a need that this grant is intended to help with. And because you can request reimbursement for funds spent beginning March 1, that's going to be cleaner and faster and a lot less kind of risk for everybody if you submit for those expenses. And it's still cash in hand that then you will have, in business terms, you've got a little more liquid cash assets on hand to use for your business in the coming months as needed.
And Laura, that was
thinking about it.
That was my question, and I was wondering about if I should include that or just exclude it altogether, because the way they do things, they're not going to send you a bill and make you pay on that until after it's up and running by about a month, and that probably won't happen until spring or summer. So maybe I just leave that off.
That would not work because you need to show that you have actually incurred the expense.
Okay.
And if you don't have a way to show that, and technically, actually, that's a really great question. Not only do you need to have incurred the expense, but you really should have received the goods and services by December 30th.
Okay.
So here's an example that I could see happening. Someone purchases some equipment. It's delivered December 20th. You get invoiced for it or you get a bill from that equipment manufacturer or supplier, but you may not actually, they may not actually cash your check until January 15th, but you have that equipment, they have billed you for it, you're on the hook to pay that. You're going to pay it by January 15th, and then you can submit that receipt to WSDA by the end of January to get reimbursed.
Okay, so that would bring up another question. If I was able to pay that before the end of the year, and I don't know because they're still working on the application, should I include it and then we can just see if it gets expensed by the end of the year or not? So I'd be including it in the grant, but then maybe it doesn't actually get on my books until after the deadline of expenses. So then it would just be excluded.
Well, yeah. So say that's $50,000. Then those $50,000 you would not receive. you would
Okay.
not be able to reimburse for. So if you have something else that you know you can reimburse for that's would allow you to obtain that $50,000, it's probably better for you.
Okay. Let me see if I can be a little more clear. So it's possible I could get it done before the end of the year, but it's also possible it won't make it. So with the grants being, or the applications being due on November 16th, should I, and I'm well under the cap, but should I include it? And then if it doesn't make the expenses, it just doesn't get paid out? Or should I exclude it now?
Yeah. Well, I'm not giving official advice.
Yeah. All
But
right.
I think if you're under the cap, well, you may as well. And then just
Include it.
knowing that you may not be able to submit and you may not receive
Okay.
funding.
That's my
for
question.
that.
Like, I don't want to
Yes.
have things I'm not sure about. And then my second question is,
Yeah.
when it comes to submitting expenses, and I've been working on this since spring, and I have a detailed spreadsheet with all of my expenses because I've been keeping track of this. Would I be able to submit the spreadsheet and then receipts on request, or do I need to start making copies of receipts? Because if I need to start making copies of receipts, I probably should have started last week, just copying all those. But I mean, I have them.
You don't need to submit receipts with your grant application.
Okay.
So sorry, I guess I did kind of blow over the grant process. I apologize. So once an award is determined, applicants will get a notification that they've either have been awarded or not been awarded and how much that award is going to be. And then the applicant will have to, at that point, the awardee will have to sign a contract with WSDA that will specify what the expenditures are the expected expenditures are and how much money that is. And then you'll submit your reimbursement requests against that agreement. So if there's, and those grant agreements are going to be based on the information you provide in your application. So if you say you want to build out a kill floor and buy a big cooler, or you've already done that, and then what you submit for is overtime and worker PPE, we're going to say that's not what you got an award for. There may be a potential. Sometimes, things come up and things come up, and sometimes there's a need to make contract amendments, but we are really not going to be particularly open to that because there's simply not time.
Okay.
And a lot of people have asked about that time, that hard, kind of weird two things. That's kind of like, why do you have such a hard deadline? And number two, why are you offering a grant that's supposed to help meat processors right during meat processors' busiest season? And those are two excellent questions. And it's really just about the timing of this federal relief. We actually raised the issue and the need in July. It just took a long time to learn that we had funds available. And now we're trying to move really fast. And that December 30th is a requirement of the US Treasury. So we don't have any leeway on that unless at some point the US Treasury changes their rules, but we don't think that's going to happen.
And
Okay.
Laura, and I wanted to just add, I know you mentioned the other day, so it sounds like whatever you are submitting for, you need to make sure you have documentation to support it if you get awarded, because that's how you're going to get reimbursed. So it sounds like,
Right.
Matthew, that as long as just hold on to all those receipts. If you're using them to justify those expenses, then when you do the reimbursements, you're going to need that documentation.
I guess my question is, since I have all the expenses and receipts on file, which I always do, but I also have a spreadsheet where I've been tracking all of those very specific expenses against an SBA loan. And so my question is, will I need to submit copies of all of those receipts if I were to be awarded, or and maybe you can't answer this, maybe the spreadsheet would suffice and the receipts could be upon request, or it's a lot of receipts. It's a lot of work to make copies of all those. So I guess that's what I'm asking.
We will need some backup documentation to make a payment. So you know, if you have a photocopy, so if you're submitting, say, I paid this contractor to install electrical, or I bought this meat cutting piece of equipment, bought a sausage maker grinder, and that you're gonna basically invoice WSDA for those expenses, and you're gonna say, this is what each one of those things cost me, and here's the receipts to back that up.
So Laura, this is Vicky. Just to follow up on the question, is there a cost limit where a receipt's required or not? So I could have a
Oh, that's a
spreadsheet
good
that
question.
has, you know, a whole bunch of $10 items that add up within a spreadsheet to an activity that's, you know, maybe $500. But do I have to submit all my $10 receipts?
Yeah, Vicky, that's a really great question, and maybe that's what you're getting at, Matthew. I don't know the answer to that yet. I hope that we would be able to do something that's reasonable, but I'm still working with fiscal on those specific documentation requirements. And that's the type of thing that will be clarified in your contract. But if I can provide that information sooner, just so people can be planning, we're trying to do that. Just don't have it yet. I'll be honest with everybody, we're moving really fast on this because we know it's needed, and the time frame is challenging. So trying to be as clear as we can and provide information that's helpful when we get it.
So we have another question. Oh, go ahead, Paul. I was going to say we have another question, and then we'll move on to you.
No,
and
I had a quick question. So
Sure.
that ties into all this discussion. So if a company or a plant decides that they want to do some type of expansion, okay, we know we're not going to get the cement poured, we know we're not going to get the structure put up, but if they can purchase equipment with the intent that that will eventually go into a new facility or building that's going to expand their production, they can get the equipment purchase done by December 30th with the intent that the building will be coming later, because they're going to have to pay for that out of pocket. They're going to have to wait for a contractor and all that. Is that going to be an allowable expense?
Yes.
Okay. Because I've had some people talking to me, and that's what I said. I said, well, the equipment purchase might be a quicker fit and items that are going to help you get to that point, and that's going to give you the base to be able to pay for the building and structure down the road. But you'll probably have to explain that in your grant process to say, look, you know, this is, we have the intention of doing this. We have plans, or here's what
Yeah,
we're
I would
That's
say you don't necessarily need to go into a lot of detail on that. You just say
Okay.
this piece of equipment is going to help me expand, and I'm going to purchase it by the end of the grant period. And
Okay.
here's my receipt. These coronavirus relief funds are intended to help processors recoup expenses that they have made in this year because of the coronavirus pandemic. So if the expenses incurred, or the equipment or the facilities improvements that are made in this year to respond to the pandemic conditions continue to bring the operation benefit into the coming year, that's bonus. But that's not the intent of the coronavirus funds. The intent of the coronavirus funds are to cover expenses made in response to the pandemic this year.
Great. Thanks,
So I would say,
Laura.
just if you just fill out the form and say, I know I have this demand, my customers want this, my equipment's old, it can't handle the demand. If I buy this equipment, it's going to let me do that better or more, and I'm going to buy that equipment by the end of this year. That's what we want to know. I don't
Great.
actually really care to know about expanding facilities in the future.
Good to know. Okay, so we have another question here from Peninsula Harvest, just new to grant writing. Should they be asking for smaller and larger items in the application so that larger items could potentially be omitted to still approval for sort of smaller items? Like, be strategic about asking for a lot of, or reimbursement for a lot of different things, knowing that there may be some culling, I guess.
I would say ask for the things that are making the most difference for your operation and explain what that is.
And then the last question we have is it worth applying if you're a poultry processor?
Do not have an answer to that.
Yeah, we just don't know how many applicants we're going to get. Okay, let's move on to
Just
Sarah.
want to
and
quick
go
clarify
ahead.
that question around the deadline. It's really bizarre, but it's actually December 30th. It's not December 31st. I don't know why, but that is it's December 30, so one day before the end of the month. And equipment should be received and purchased. The only small caveat there is we all know that supply chains are disrupted right now. And so if for some unforeseen reason, something that was intended to arrive by December 31st is delayed, but it was an unforeseen delay, there's maybe a little bit of flexibility there. But people should not be planning to have something arrive a lot later than December 30.
Great. And just a clarifying, someone asked, is the approval based on like all or nothing? But we already talked, I think it can be selective in terms of how the reviewers look at expenses.
Yeah, and I'll just be honest, we don't know exactly how that will go because it's dependent upon the applications received. But our intention is if expenses are eligible, meaning that they're contributing to the purpose of the grant, of the larger outcome, and they actually meet the technical eligibility requirements, you know, we want to try to get that funding to people as quickly as possible and as much as is reasonable.
Great. We're going to move on and talk with Sarah and Paul, and Laura's still on the call. Thank you so much, Laura. So we're going to still continue to field questions and comments. Any other feedback that people may have, just put it in the chat. And I'd like to welcome Paul Kuber and Sarah Smith. They're both livestock extension specialists that we have in the state of Washington. And they're going to be providing technical assistance for folks that are applying for this grant program. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Okay, hang on. I'm trying to get the slide set up. Let's see. Hang on one second. Okay, can you see the slides now?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, all right, sounds good. And Sarah, we'll have to, I'll link it over to you and so you can share your screen when it comes to your term. So again, you know, thanks for everybody who's attending. And, you know, we just wanted to create some opportunities and actually showcase this partnership between Washington State Department of Ag and Washington State University. And certainly some of the dynamic work that we can pull together and move forward on this pandemic relief. So Laura and Nicole and well, both Laura's, Laura Raymond and Laura Lewis and Nicole had asked that we give kind of a little bit of our background and expertise in terms of how we can help and support you processors here in the state of Washington. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of my background, both my master's degree and my PhD were in meat science. It didn't take me 8 years to get from my master's to my PhD, but I had about a 5-year period that I was in industry, and you'll see that here in a second with an additional slide. I worked with Dr. Mandigo, who was kind of a processed meats guru at University of Nebraska when I did my master's degree right after my undergrad, and worked mostly in restructured meat products and further processing. It was kind of during that time where we had the low-fat revolution. Dr. Mandigo was instrumental in developing the McRib and the technology behind that. Some of you guys know that that's a seasonal item with McDonald's and certainly kind of a big hit. And pretty involved with, that was during kind of a whole restructuring revolution. So got quite a bit of interest and knowledge in terms of process meats. Again, I did take a stint where I completed my master's degree in '93, and then I went to work in industry. After my 5 years in industry, I came back to WSU and I did a meat science PhD. So that focused mostly on red meat eating quality, so species differences, breed differences, diet, muscle location. That was my first exposure to Sarah Smith, and we were both graduate students at the same time in the Department of Animal Science. I worked a little bit on forage applications and diet applications with sunflower oil, linseed oil, and some potato waste pieces where we were looking at the effects of meat quality. And then also was actively involved in teaching extension efforts, particularly with Jan Busboom's interest and his involvement with the Northwest Meat Processors Association. Between my PhD and my master's degree, I actually put 5 years in where I was working with Superior Farms, which is the largest, now is one of the largest lamb processors here in the US, and one of the ones that's actually existing during this time. Compared to where we were in 1993 with some of the shift of the large corporate pieces. With regard to Superior Farms, I got quite a bit of in-plant knowledge and experience with quality assurance, so food safety, product development as well. Worked at the corporate level. They eventually moved me into a upper management program and pulled me into the live lamb procurement side, and so working in feedlot operations, and then eventually into plant management on an international basis when I was in Australia for about a 2-year period. So kind of had a pretty full corporate experience during that time. It also gave me an opportunity to realize that I missed working with people and teaching, and that was one of the reasons that I decided to come back for a PhD. I had worked with Jan Busboom, and then at that time, Susan Duckett was at University of Idaho, and I came back to the Pacific Northwest and had my opportunity to work on my PhD. After my PhD, I was faculty at University of Idaho, so certainly got involved with the Northwest Meat Processors Association as a faculty member. Continued my work in beef palatability, further processing, residual feed intake studies, those type of things. So quite a bit on that live animal side and how that translated into meat quality. I eventually was recruited by Ohio State University and was in the Department of Animal Sciences, and again, continued the meat quality palatability piece and consumer preference piece. Worked on quite a few extension programs. The Amish community was a pretty dynamic community in Ohio and doing a lot with direct sales. So I had quite a bit of experience there, and then taught a series of advanced courses that kind of tied in with food animal products, or predominantly tied in with food animal products. And we actually had the first 4-credit course in a university setting that was sponsored by Weber Grills, and it was a barbecue science course. So had a chance to share a lot of my culinary interest and expertise on the meat science side, as well as other protein sources other than just red meat. So that kind of brings me to Washington State University. And in this position, I wanted to get back to the Northwest. Really missed the West Coast. Ohio was a little bit flat for me. And so this is an opportunity to come back to the Pacific Northwest. I work in a regional livestock extension position, work with forage producers here in the Northeast part of Washington. And then I also partner with some of my other colleagues, Sarah Smith, who you'll hear from here in a second, in terms of food animal production type programs. And so I work with small and large livestock and forage producers, as well as some meat processors. Responsible for the meat fermentation portion of the fermented foods class that's housed out of food science. It's actually got a joint listing, food science, animal science. And then I also do extension producer programs and presentations focused on animal selection, carcass quality improvements, animal handling, food safety, and preparation. Some of the extension work that I've been doing, again, working with the livestock and forage producer groups, kind of a farm to table approach on a lot of my educational programs. So from the start of that animal's life to the completion and what that consumer experience is. I've been pretty instrumental with food safety and quality assurance programs on the livestock side, because there's a lot of things we do to animals that, you know, could potentially affect product quality and safety. And so one of those programs is a youth focused program, Youth for the Quality Care of Animals. Another federal grant that I'm working on right now that I'm leading is it's a foreign animal disease prevention and to mitigate spread of that disease. And it's called Prepare to Respond. And so we're looking at creating a national curriculum that'll certainly help us out locally. I mean, if we think about Washington, we've got two borders, one that's a direct border with Canada and one that's an indirect border where we could potentially have some threats and diseases come into our livestock industry. And so we want to make sure we mitigate that as soon as possible. So that gives you a little bit of my background and experiences. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sarah at this point. So let me stop sharing for a second. And Sarah, if you'd like to share your slide set.
Sure. And Paul, are you going to go back and share your other slides when we're done here?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. So. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be on here with you. As Laura and Paula said, I'm a regional animal science extension specialist. I'm based out of the Grant Adams Extension Office. Don't ask me why that date is on there other than I pulled the slide from another presentation. Yes, I will admit that I am based out of the Columbia Basin area. That's my primary area. But any of you that I've worked with in the past, and as many of you know, I do statewide programming. Just the other night, I was on a program doing swine teaching, primarily for the West Side, but it was across the state since it was Zoom capability. So just because my address and location says Grant Adams, don't let that think that that's where my boundaries stop. I've been known to serve the whole Pacific Northwest from that standpoint, and see that for us to be vital, we need a complete and robust livestock industry from farm through harvest of all sizes of producers for all of Washington state. So I hope that eases anybody's mind that when you see Paul's and my address, that it's a 509 number, that means that we can't help people on the West Side. That is not the case. We're here for everybody and for the good of the whole livestock industry and the consumers that depend on these animals. As I said to both Laura's, we're depending on some of the meat markets that you have from a consumer standpoint, but also some of your cull markets from the East Side, as you guys are dependent on us for some of the seed stock and some of the animals that move over. So my goal is make sure that we provide scientific research-based information to our individuals, be it producers or processors, to help you make the best decision. We're helping all segments. And again, I really want to stress, I think that sometimes people, especially in my area, when you see my area and some of the producers I work with, think that size matters. It doesn't. We work with all segments. And like I said, that even some of my large producers over here, feedlots, are very much dependent upon some of the smaller operations and operations from other regions outside of our area. Do a lot of collaborative work with people like Paul, and even outside of our areas with national organizations. I have good ties with both our state organizations, be it the Washington cattle feeders, the sheep producers, the Washington pork producers, and also our national ones to help bring in new technology and advice from that standpoint. And again, I probably put it in here a few times, but I just want you guys to know that size and type, I work with everything from organic producers to conventionals, grass-fed to corn-fed. Sorry, I now know what it's like to try to work with somebody at home. I have a dog that has decided that when I'm on PowerPoints that they like to be part of it. My emphasis is really around beef, sheep, and hogs. When I say beef cattle, that it doesn't mean that I don't work with the dairy cow. I usually work with the dairy cow when it goes into that food chain of meat production. My emphasis is in meat quality and safety assurance, working with both the producer and the processor to make sure that we can do that if it's implementing practices on farm, but also with our HACCP plans. Animal care and handling is also a specialty I have, especially for handling animals pre-harvest, not only to make sure that we have a quality meat product, but that we're handling those animals in a manner that ensures a good quality of life and a timely death, both so that our consumers meets their needs, but also is what our animals deserve. And, you know, I always put this in here, got to make sure that we remain profitable. It's one of these things to do it, but at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we help our processors be profitable. And I'm like you, Laura Raymond, I got to move my thing down. And again, I put it in again, producers of all size and scale. So there are some pictures. You see that I work with everything from trying to develop or implement the best working facility.
Oh, you're muted, Sarah.
Oh, now I'm off. I'm trying to hit too many buttons. Let's see. Now I probably made my screen upset.
Nope, looks good.
Oh, looks good. Yeah.
Everything
Well,
looks good.
yeah, but it's not switching. It's not switching now. Just a minute. I must have hit, oops. Is it sharing now?
It is. It's not in slideshow format yet, but
Yeah, I don't know.
oh,
why.
maybe it says resume slideshow. I wonder if you have to hit that
Where do you
button.
see that at?
It is right between.
Oh, right
yeah.
there. Yeah, I'm a little worried that we are like, oh, look at, I even have a new slide now. I'm a little worried that we're like you guys on the west side, we're having big windstorms here right now. So things are kind of going in and out.
Yeah, go ahead and just use the slides without the slideshow function. That's fine. Yeah,
so
great.
One of the things that we have, some of you guys may be aware of, and that is going to help us hit the ground running. We've already done a lot of programs for beef, pork, and lambs. We called it the 100, 200, and 300 programs. Some of you guys might remember those. We did these in Oregon, California, and Wyoming also. And basically the 100, 200 were more for the new and small scale producers with varying expertise. But where we think some of our programs that we offered for our pork and lamb and beef 300 programs was a very hands-on, hand at table. And so some of the things that Paul and I have talked about is pulling out like the fabrication section of that to help teach some of our labor workforce to hopefully make them a little bit more dynamic. Like I said, I think one of the other great assets that we have, of course, everybody is busy, but one of the things that the pandemic has made us very much aware of is, one, we don't have to travel, and two, we have access to a lot of collaborations across the US. So sometimes if we don't have the answer, if I can't get it from Paul, we can definitely tap into some of our retired people like Jan Buzzboom, or even people from across the country at other universities or even at the National Pork Board. Also, one of the things that we developed as part of this program was an app that was a huge learning experience. And when we kind of went out there and have done some looking, I think there might be some opportunities to look at in the future developing an app to help processors and producers and consumers have a better idea of kind of explanation. So those are some things that are kind of on our script. There's the slide I stuck in that just popped up all of a sudden. Oh, look at, I'm just getting like lots of more, I don't know what's happening. Like I said, there's a big windstorm coming, so I think it's playing with my internet a little bit. But to finish off, just with this process so far, I've had the the privilege to get to work with some local processors, both USDA and custom, just looking over the grant, working through it, and submitting their applications. So I'm happy to help to do that with anybody. Our goals also are to help you kind of think through this process and make the best, if these are new purchases, make the best decisions to have maximize the impact of what COVID impacted you with. And as Laura Raymond said, if it can have long-term effects to better benefit us, because this has been a crisis we've been dealing with before private, that would be great. And like again, I said, I'm happy to help regardless of your location or size, especially with technology and ability to call people on cell phones and take pictures. I think that there's a lot we can do. I will put my email and my cell phone number in the chat box, because I am in and out at my office. We're still doing a lot of work from home because of COVID requirements with our office requirements. So with that, I will stop sharing and I will turn it back to Paul.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah.
Trying to. Okay, can you see that now? Is that coming through?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Sarah. You know, as Sarah said, you know, we work together in a lot of different capacities, and I think we complement one another, and particularly insisting with this type of application, you know, we can help with ideas and thoughts and processes from start to finish in this meets industry piece. So I guess, you know, from a continual educational engagement standpoint, you know, I'm a learner, as many of us in academic settings are. Partners and colleagues across the U.S., as Sarah had mentioned, you know, we certainly have a lot of resources. So if there's things that we don't know, we can certainly reach out at pretty quick turnaround. If it's various things in terms of layout or equipment use and those kind of things, so we can help any way we possibly can. You know, I guess, you know, I learn as much from producers and processors as I can share. You know, I'm being in that continued learner environment. There's a lot of things that'll be kind of eye-opening experiences for myself. And so we want to try and develop that partnership, expand that. I had a really good talk with the Northwest Meat Processors Association the other day, as they indicated they were going to share the information about this grant. They're going to try and work with their members within the state of Washington to help facilitate the use of these funds. And we had a great discussion. And so it was a good opportunity for me to be reconnected with them and to open up that door with WSU and that link. And so, you know, we're in this to help you guys, to help those of you that might be active in the Processors Association or the Northwest Meat Processors Association. As Laura Raymond had mentioned, we do have some funds that are coming back to WSU. A portion of those funds are going to be used for developing a mobile classroom for meat science and further processing of meats and teaching and demonstrations. And so stay tuned for that. We're under the same guidelines that you are, so I'm scrambling to get that done, but I think in a goodwill effort, we'll certainly be at that point. I had already started to make some calls about that process, but certainly that's something that we can bring to you. So as this moves forward, I wanted to just kind of put that as an idea generator. If you've got some ideas for virtual programs that you would like to do where we can travel to you, that would be fantastic. So with regard to equipment purchases to improve volume and efficiency, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to kind of throw this out here. There have been some questions that have come into my email inbox, and those questions kind of focused around, well, I'm not sure what size equipment to purchase. I'm not sure what items are really going to benefit me the most. And I guess the biggest thing is you've got to be able to at least have an idea of your throughput and projected volume. And you've also got to be able to know what space availability that you do have for those pieces of equipment, because some of them may fit into your operation, some may not. And if you've got ideas or thoughts about expansion of a facility, that's one thing, you know, because then you can buy the equipment or the pieces and then maybe build that around that. But if you don't have ideas of expansion, make sure that you're getting something that fits into your space and that will actually do what you need it to do to meet your customers' needs. Power requirements and infrastructure for that product is going to be a key thing as well. And then maintenance and access too. There's a lot of great pieces of equipment out there. But if you buy a German piece of equipment, you may not have the availability of somebody to service that equipment long term. So make sure that you have accessibility to somebody who can help you if there's a problem down the road. And I mean, these are just ideas to kind of keep in mind as you're buying equipment. And then durability, knowing the volume and throughput, is that enough? You know, some pieces of equipment are rated as heavy duty. And that might be something to really consider. If you're using this on a daily basis, it may give you a rating of you can do up to X number of pounds per hour. But if you're planning to do that 8 hours a day for 5 or 6 days a week, make sure that a piece of equipment can handle that. Because you know, I've heard of people buying pieces that they thought would do the volume, but then they just don't have the sustainability or durability. And then again, that access piece to maintenance. So those are just a few things that I wanted to kind of give you some ideas in terms of some of the questions that are already starting to come into my inbox as far as processing equipment. A really good suppliers page, if you're not aware of it, is on the Northwest Meat Processors Association. This is on their public facing website. There's suppliers there that deal with small scale processing, and there's suppliers there that deal with large scale. And some of those have website links, some of them have phone numbers and email contacts, so you can contact a regional salesperson. I talked to Jerry Hahn, who's the executive secretary. He's also owns Hahn's Meats in Walla Walla, so he's got a very clear, you know, not only is he working in the meats industry as a private owner of a facility, but he's also helping to run the association. And again, we had a really productive talk. He said he was supporting this. He was going to be sending it out to his members, but this is a public facing page on this, this PowerPoint here. I can drop that into the chat box as Sarah had indicated. I also included both of our email addresses. I can put my cell phone into the chat box as well with the email address, so you guys have links to that. But that, you know, at this point, if there are any questions, you know, I'll certainly entertain that. Or if we want to wait till the end, Laura, I can leave that up to you on what we'd like to do.
Yeah, go ahead and just keep going, and people can ask the questions in the chat, and we can collect them as and then field them to you.
Okay.
Is this your last slide?
That was it.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to know. Okay. So thank you so much. Yeah, so we can take questions now, definitely. And I wanted to also let folks know that we're going to be using the WA Meetup website to post a list of a great product list that Paul and Sarah already put together. So that will be up there with links to different resources. And then like they said, reach out to them if you have questions. It doesn't matter where you are in the state. They're happy to answer technical assistant questions associated with this grant. So if you have questions about eligibility or how to apply, definitely route those to the WSDA. If you have questions related specifically around technical assistance for equipment, capital improvements, different types of processing methods, please reach out to the WSU technical assistance team, which is being headed up by Sarah and Paul. So yeah, do we have any questions? Anyone on the line have specific questions around technical assistance as well as specifically for the WSDA? And just to let everyone know as well, in the week or so to come, we will also be providing a lot more information about the funds that came into WSU. So we really want to put our energy right now through this grant period that's closing on November 16th to support those of you in the sector as much as possible as we put together some information about the specific funds that WSU received as well. I see that not Sarah, but Kelly also put some topics in here that they were looking for, and in terms of some outreach. And one of the things that she mentioned was the demand for local eggs that has also skyrocketed. And I'm wondering if there's been any discussion. I know we're talking specifically about meat and livestock, but we do have poultry producers on the call as well. And if there's any specific work that's happening right now around poultry within WSU Extension.
So I will admit I am not a poultry expert whatsoever. However, I know that through our vet extension program, we have a new hire that's came in the last year that works a lot with some diseases and stuff, and they had the Poultry Institute. We also have some extension faculty. I think Pam Watson is one on the west side that does it, and they have some opportunities, and they're doing some programming for poultry. When we did our 100 programs, we did include poultry, and we worked with Dr. Jim Hermes out of Oregon. So I will definitely keep that on our radar screen. You're right. Poultry has skyrocketed. The sale of birds is huge, both for meat and poultry. So it is definitely a thing that we want to make sure we keep that on our radar. And as I see opportunities come out of either the vet extension with the Poultry Institute or Pam Watson, I'll let you guys know. I'll have to admit my expertise is very much lacking when it comes to chickens. And I probably shouldn't say this on here, but I'm not an egg fan. So it's not been something I'm really good at.
No shame, no shame.
Hey, Sarah and Paul, real quick. I was just wondering, the irrigated ag newsletter, is that the best place for folks to sign up if they want to receive word of any upcoming courses you guys might be offering, or is there a specific spot you would send anybody to get on a list for that?
So a couple things there. Thanks, Nicole. And I did put this in the chat. It was asked about topics. And I help organize the Washington State Swine Day, and definitely the way things are looking, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to have that in person. The state sheep producers have already had to cancel theirs, and the cattlemen. So we're looking at ways to revamp that and do some hourly webinars, because what we're finding is most people do not want to participate in an 8-hour or 2-day webinar series, but 1 hour each night. I will have to admit it was quite entertaining. Well, it wasn't entertaining. It was just actually very relaxing to watch people listen to me talk about pigs and drink wine, something that never happens when I'm doing a in-person presentation at some of our programs. So I think there's going to definitely be some opportunities there. We just kind of have to get through some of this hiccup time of getting over our annual conventions that we're typically at, and then we'll start offering them as Zooms. And most likely I'm looking in mid-afternoon for some of our larger commercial that would go to the state ones, because that's when they would be in, but also evening classes, as that seems that fits producers that have to work away from the farm on that sense. So we'll keep those topics, and I think you will see them. We do have the animalag.wsu.edu website that will have events. More than welcome to sign up for the irrigated ag. That's one that comes through my office, and you set up for which segment you want, so you could just get livestock information. And I definitely try to make sure people are aware of any opportunities that way. I'll definitely try to do a better job of also forwarding those to you, Nicole and Laura, as we develop those seminar series. But it looks like we definitely will have a pretty in-depth seminar series for our swine producers that will tap into the National Pork Board and local ones as we cancel I don't want to say that we're canceling our Washington State Swine Day at this time, because we're not, but if everything keeps progressing as it is, I think it's going to be very difficult to have an in-person one.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that in terms of the Northwest Meat Processor Association. I put the main page for the organization. They've actually got front and center, which I just noticed this morning, about the pandemic relief grant. So that's housed on their site. So that links back to everything that Laura Raymond has offered. And then if you go to the supplier list there, I've got the actual page pulled up, and you'll be able to find all the suppliers on there. And as Nicole had indicated, we've got kind of a narrowed down viewpoint of suppliers that would be good to purchase some equipment.
We've got a great question here from Peninsula Harvest. So they're a WSDA licensed mobile farm slaughter operation out on the peninsula. They currently have only one cut and wrap operation out here, and that can process the carcasses coming off their truck. Therefore, a few of them have been working on ideas for adding cut and wrap capacity. They've been focused on just meeting the WSDA demand. They've been trying to come up with lower upfront costs and overhead options, looking at insulated shipping containers converted for cut rooms, as well as hanging coolers. We are having trouble getting traction and expertise in getting things moving. Any advice, help on this?
Yeah, if you want to, I mean, if you'd like to talk with me directly, we can certainly have some discussions. And I like that idea, and I think that's one way to actually improve infrastructure. For some small scale operations is to be able to use some of those. Even if you look at the large packing industry, usually when they expand or they have product overload, they're using some type of shipping containers, refrigerated containers. And as long as the product is packaged when it leaves a facility or a plant, goes into one of those, you can use those as a holding situation. Building a cut and wrap facility within one of those, and as long as transfer from one container to another for storage, that product is in a sealed process, should be okay. But we can certainly talk a little more direct if you'd like to.
Great, thanks, Paul. Other questions? Great. Well,
there's
go
some
ahead.
topics about the meat coolers, and yes, there is lots. Just been watching the chat. There is a lot of information on using those coolers, even outside of USDA, in our custom harvest plants, to either hang carcasses or age meat in, or to create a extra freezer space. So there's lots of information on how to do that.
So I would just like to build on this great conversation and say that these conversations that are just emerging right now at the end of our call are exactly why WSU is here in this capacity today, is to let all of you and the potential applicants that you're working with know that Sarah and Paul are available to applicants to work through these questions before filling out their application. That's the entire purpose of some of that technical assistance funding that's coming through the CARES Act, is to make this expertise at WSU available. So this is the coming out party.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So I just want to make sure that people understand that, that's the resource. Please take advantage of it. And there certainly is a lot of producer to producer and processor to processor knowledge, but also we're really aware that this is everybody's really busy time. And so we want you to know that there is supported resource at WSU right now for this purpose.
And like you said earlier, Laura, we don't have the silver bullet. We will try and assist you. That doesn't guarantee that we're going to get you to funding, but at least if we can give you some ideas to help with that process, that's what we're here, we're here for. So any way we can help.
I saw a question just from Kelly about whether there'll be more potential funds, and because it's a federal CARES Act, it ends at the end of this year, but we're hoping that there'll be potential other avenues to help continue supporting this work as we move into the next year. So, but nothing through CARES, nothing guaranteed at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and open the floor for discussion. We can continue talking about the rapid response grants for livestock producers that's coming through the WSDA, technical support through WSU, and anything else that people want to bring up and share, potential topics, other resources, webinars that you may have, other opportunities that you just want to make people aware of that may be closing soon.
Hi, this is Nils Johnson. I missed the first half hour of the meeting, and I just wanted to double check that is there going to be a recording available?
Yes, we are actually live on YouTube right now. So we're being recorded, and yes, so this will be available just moments after our meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing we want to encourage all of you working as resource providers. If you have processors that are coming to you for general information, you can definitely send them to this page and let it kind of act as sort of a grant webinar overview, so they can see what the application package includes and the eligibility requirements. Just familiarize themselves with the web page. And the documents, and then get to know a little bit more about the technical assistance that WSU can support. Like I said, we're going to be updating our WA Meetup website with information as well. We're going to redirect everything related to the grant and the application itself to the WSDA website, but we'll make sure any technical assistance materials will be populated on that web page as well.
And it's
Laura,
not there yet, but there will be a link. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, are we putting together a list of FAQs?
Yes.
Okay.
It was already, there's a draft that's going around between a couple folks right now. So from our call on Wednesday. So we hope to get that out very soon.
Okay.
And if people have suggestions of questions you'd really like to make sure are on that, please go ahead and just email me directly. I'll type my email in the chat. And I would also say the WA Meetup page will also be linked from the WSDA grant page. It's not there yet, but we will have that technical assistance link. So we're really wanting WA Meetup to be a resource hub. And so for people what I'm finding is I'm also getting a lot of questions just from meat producers and processors in general because of the attention. And so I think that will also be a nice resource to just refer people to, even if they're not going to be preparing an application.
We have an announcement here from Business Impact Northwest, Henry, about there's still a few spots open with the King County Farm e-commerce program, and you need to apply before November 9th. Do you want to add anything else?
No, that was it. So if there's a link to the application, but yeah, this is part of that King County CARES Act funding. So the timeline's kind of short on that. So yeah, apply before November 9th, and then we have a way to catch up the farms on all the earlier content they might have missed. And I'll throw my email in the chat as well if there's any additional questions.
Great, thank you. Double the opportunity for King County producers or processors.
No double dipping.
No double dipping, but there could be double opportunity there. So great. Thank you so much, Henry. Just a reminder that next week we're going to be, we're transitioning now to the first Friday of the month being our First Friday Food Systems check-in, which is what we were doing pre-COVID. So on that first Friday of the month, we invite all of our WSU team members to join the call. Anyone else who has partnered with us or wants to collaborate and partner with us, we're going to do a round robin check-in So folks can update everyone on what they've been up to, what programs they currently have going on. And this is a great way for us to hear once a month from everyone who's on these calls. And then also just look at potential topics for future hub calls as well. It's it's a great way to hear about all the great work that all of you are doing. Remind everyone to send us any updates for the website. Obviously, we're going to be working on updating the WA Meetup website as well. It's in process right now. But check out our calendar of events on our foodsystems.wsu.edu website. And then again, anytime you think of good speakers, topics that are out there that you think we should focus on, let us know. There's several conferences coming up. We are co-sponsoring Grains of Revolution, which if Abba's on the call, maybe she can put in a plug for that. I believe it's the 5th and 6th or 4th and 5th of November. See if she's still on. I know with power outages, we've had a lot of. So that is coming up. Cascadia Grains and the Food Systems Program is co-sponsoring, or not co-sponsoring, but sponsoring that project. It's through Chatham University. And we've been working very closely with the Appalachian Staple Foods Collaborative. And so that is part of some of our Cascadia Grains work that we're doing. So we're really excited to help support that conference. And then obviously Tilth Conference is coming up. So Tilth Alliance has their conference the 9th and 10th of November. So we hope to see many of you there. We'll have a virtual resource table there. And we're also going to be kicking off the Eat Local First statewide farm and food finder. So that's coming together as well. So some of the things you've heard about on these hub calls, you'll see some updates about and some programs rolling out. Any last comments, feedback, any stories anyone wants to share before we sign off?
Laura, I would just add, there's something that I thought was really good that Matt Cox was doing, and that is keeping that detailed spreadsheet, because somebody has asked will there be additional fundings? What will happen next year? And we don't know, but I do know that we have seen even at the federal level a real interest and a push to try to bring this meat issue to the forefront and to come up with solutions. So we never know if there might be additional funds coming, but being able to be ready with some either detailed accounting sheets that you have will definitely help you move through their ideas that you want to do in the future, because I don't think this issue is just something, it isn't an issue we're just seeing it here in Washington, and I think there might be grander efforts at the federal level in the long term.
Such a great reminder, Sarah. Thank you so much. I know documentation, record keeping, I mean, it's important all the time, but it's been particularly important with these federal and state programs coming out where you need to provide documentation to be eligible. So yeah, can't emphasize that enough. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. This was a really great and resourceful hub call. I'm so thankful for the WSDA and for Paul and Sarah from WSU Extension being available today. If you have specific questions about the grant program, eligibility, application, and so forth, please reach out directly to the WSDA. If you have technical assistance questions related to this program, please reach out to WSU Extension. We're working together to make sure that you can submit an application that will hopefully be successful. So cheers to all of you. Have a spooky weekend. We've got the full moon and Halloween and daylight savings upon us. So I wish you all luck and hopefully a good Monday morning. So take care, and I'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura and Laura.